We're ready. So welcome everyone to the Charter and Rules Committee meeting of the Holyoke City Council. I am Councilor MALDONADO-VELEZ, the chair. With me here in the chambers, I have Councilor Tessa Murphy-Ramboletti, vice chair, and zooming in, we have Councilor/President of the Council, Todd McGee. We also have joining us here in the chambers, Councilor Bacon, and on Zoom we have Councilor Will Buello and Attorney Mike Bissonette. This meeting is taking place at Holyoke City Hall. You can access it on Zoom, also on the Channel 15 and on Boxcast, Holyoke Media page. And there is Spanish translation as well available for those people that need it. We do got to do a quick motion because Councilor McGee is not here.
So motion to take a roll call vote that for the purposes of this meeting would be applicable to all motions to remove an item from the table, lay items on the table, package items, suspend the rules unless there is an objection.
Okay, so I'll second that. I'll do a roll call. Councilor McGee?
Second. Kind of went in and out, sorry.
No, you're good. We just need a yes or no.
Yes.
Okay, Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti?
Yes.
And Councilor MALDONADO-VELEZ? Yes, perfect. So there is, Megan is here, so we can start off with the CPA.
A motion to take item 5 through 7 out of order for the
And as a package.
as a package. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, so orders 5
Aye.
through 7. Order number 5 is by Councilor Bacon. Order that our city solicitor draft a ballot question for the next eligible election for voters to decide if the CPA tax should be reduced from 1.5% to 0.5% in light of current financial hardship of our taxpayers. Item number 6, also by Councilor Bacon, that our city solicitor draft a ballot question to revoke the CPA tax and that it be placed on the next eligible election ballot for the voters to decide if they want to keep the CPA tax after 5 years. And finally, item 7, by Councilor Bacon and Councilor Puello, that our city solicitor draft a ballot question for the next eligible question, decide if the CPA tax should be reduced from 1.5% to 0.5% in light of the current financial hardships of our taxpayers. Go on to explain, taxes will increase by over $200 per year for a house valued at $236,000 due to repeated inability to achieve 7 votes of the city council for lower taxes for homeowners. So these, before we go into the discussion, I did want to I put these on here. Want to ask questions around ballots in general, like putting questions on the ballot. Also, just based on the email I received from our city clerk. So about a month ago, I asked Brenna to see what is the process to put ballot questions on the ballot. And I just wanted to read that real quick, and then we can get into discussion for this. So first up, prior conversation. So hi, Jose. Prior conversation, a non-binding ballot question is the only way for citizens to have a question placed on the ballot, absent local approval. A non-binding question requires a petition of 10 registered voters be presented to the city council and the mayor. It must be filed 132 days prior to the date of election, which that would be June 28th, 2023. The city has 90 days to approve the petition, which if they waited to the last day, that would be September 26th. If they fail to approve it, another petition must be filed with signatures of 10% of the registered voters. And it has to be filed within 42 days of the election, which would be September 26th. So that is a process for residents to, if there's a group of people that are really interested in a ballot question to be put in the ballot, there is a process for people to collect signatures and make that happen. As far as a counselor, if you as a counselor would like to see a ballot question added, you can file an order that would go to Charter and Rules, and a public hearing will need to happen. And that's the information I got around that. So I guess my questions are, just because with this particular ballot question, I know it was referred to finance. And I remember Councilor Bacon did ask, like, did it have to go to finance or should it be going to charter and rules? So I just want clarity on, maybe Attorney Bissonnette knows it. As far as like, is there a specific committee that needs to take up ballot questions, or can it be any committee? I guess that's my first question for the attorney, if Mike Bissonnette is there.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The ballot question that you were discussing is a non-binding ballot question, advisory only. So that falls within the parameters of the authority of the City Council, seeking guidance from the community, from the voters on a specific question. So that would be the process for that. In many cases, there is a procedure set out in the enabling state. In the Community Preservation Act, there are specific provisions on how to reduce, revoke, or amend the prior ballot question authorizing the use and collection of Community Preservation Act fees. So that's where, with respect to this particular issue, Mr. Chairman, it would be subject to the constrictions of statute as to what Hoya could put on the ballot. That would not be difficult to overcome. I again call your attention to the timing as laid out by the city clerk. That's primarily about the date of a municipal primary. Usually there needs to be enough time between the municipal primary and the general election for those winners in the primary, if any, to be listed on the general ballot for November. So I would say probably September 2023, you would need to have action taken either by petition or by vote of the council for anything you'd want to see on the ballot in November of next year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Bissonnette. So for this, there's other ballot questions on the agenda today, but going for these ones specifically on the CPA, you just mentioned there's a specific process that's outlined. I don't know the process for that. Wondering if we're able to get that process for the next meeting, or at least also get a copy to finance, since the question is in there as well. Councilor Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I had refiled the order because we hadn't taken it up yet, and it was taken up at the last Finance Committee meeting, and it's been tabled there to give legal the opportunity to look at the initial ballot language in question. And in the meantime, I received the original language from our city clerk and sent it over to the finance chair and the Finance Committee, because it was already taken up there.
Huh.
So the rest of what I had included on my order, because it had been a long time since any of us had dealt with CPA, and I knew some people on the council hadn't dealt with it at all in the early days, was that because the city council put it on the ballot in the first place by vote of city council, any change to give the voters the opportunity to vote on being taxed, which I believe is their right, would have to again be initiated by the city council. So it needs a majority of the council to approve it going on to the ballot to give the voters the right to vote on it. Now, if the CPA had been approved based on a voter's petition, then a petition would have had to be filed. So I'm seeking to have the council approve it to go on the ballot so that the voters can weigh in. I don't know what other councilors are hearing, but I'm hearing a lot of feedback around the taxes, the increased water, sewer, food, gas, everything. And they're looking for some relief. So that is the largest reason why I have filed this particular order. As far as the one that I filed initially at the same time to revoke the CPA. I would actually be fine if committee wanted to give that leave to withdraw, because I think it would create confusion to try to ask 2 questions at the same time. Because if they both pass, then what do you do? You know what I mean? I think it could create more confusion than clarity. And since finance has already taken up 1, I think it might be just better off to move with 1 if possible, at least to get it before the council.
Okay.
So that's my update on that for now.
Thank you,
Thank
Councilor
you.
Reagan. Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti.
I just know that we have Megan in, I'll save my questions and stuff until after folks have a chance to weigh in. So that's it. Do I need to make a motion to suspend the rules?
Sure. To allow.
To allow, I see Joe just came off mute.
No, he just got on.
Okay. A motion to suspend the rules to allow Megan McGrath-Smith from the chair of the CPA.
So we do have the chair of the CPA with us. Megan, I'm not sure if you had any thing to add. I know as far as like the process and stuff or not. But yeah, the floor is yours.
Sure. I think one of the questions is around when something goes to the ballot, if it does. It looks to me from the language in the order that the idea is that the legal department, the city solicitor, would draft the language. But I also know in the past on the ballot, there's here's what a yes vote would be and here's what a no vote would be. I'd just be interested in making sure that that information was backed by information that the committee has. And I'm also wondering at the state level, of course, you get a really great booklet that explains to you and people get to make a pitch for here's what a yes vote is or a no vote is. I'm just wondering about how communication like that goes to our city and how citizens are informed about the vote that they're taking.
Those are great questions. I think it really just depends on us as the city councilor to spread the message and the residents to, depending on what crew wants to lead the education around it. But very good points on that. I know, so right now the orders are, one of the orders, item 7, is in finance. And I know Chair McGivern, who we are joined by Joe McGivern, Councilor McGivern on Zoom. I know he brought it up in the last meeting, actually sort of mentioned, along the lines of what Megan just said. Joe's point then was like, it just has to be a very clear yes or no. Like, this is what the yes is, this is what the no is. So I'm interested to, so I guess following the process for ballot questions, and one thing that was outlined when Brenna emailed me is that there has to be a public hearing. So would this be one of those cases too where we need to open up a public hearing for this ballot question before it then gets approved? I just want to make sure that's the process, regardless if it's here or in finance, that it gets taken up. I don't know if Attorney Bissonnette has an answer for that. Or maybe Joe knows. Joe, I just see your hand raised. Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Councilor. I can hear everybody, but you're very soft. You may have a bad mic, or I'm not sure. I got the gist of what you said, but it isn't coming through loud. As stated, and I had a little technical problem getting in myself tonight, but as stated, we do have the original order by Councilor Bacon and Councilor Ferrero in the Finance Committee. We've had one meeting, and I've had some conversations with Megan and some conversations with Linda. And what we're hoping to do is to come up with a very simple ballot question if the City Council wants to go forward with a ballot question. But what I've always said is governing by ballot is very difficult. It's our jobs to educate ourselves and to make the right decision for everybody that we represent. So if we do go to a ballot question, I would very much encourage and favor that we also have an educational component of both sides of the yes or no question. Meg and I had a conversation earlier today about, getting, and our president, Todd McGee, we want to get some historical information from what CPA has done over the last 2-3 years. And knowing that Nolan and voting on every project that's come out of their committee, I think it's been tremendous. And I think a lot of the residents of Holyoke agree with that, but you need to see that, before you ask a ballot question. There's nothing wrong with ballot questions, but they're very difficult, and many voters will sometimes just check no because they don't understand the question itself. So I think an educational component should always go with the ballot process. As far as deciding if we want to have a ballot question, that's pretty much up to us and the mayor.
Thank you, Councilor McGivern. So just to clarify, I just got an email saying that there needs to be a public hearing before we take a vote on the ballot question. I just want to clarify if that needs to happen as well as part of the process.
I've never heard of that.
I haven't either.
What's the source of your email?
It's, our city clerk.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
It's not an ordinance. It's not involving zoning. You certainly could. There's nothing prohibiting the city council from conducting a public hearing. And you certainly could take testimony on the issue if that was something that you wanted to do. And the council certainly could hear anything that the public might have to say, as long as it was posted on the agenda. So I'm not certain that a public hearing in and of itself is a requirement for the council to consider placing an amendment before the voters concerning the CPA.
Okay, thank you, Attorney
I
Bissonnette.
don't see it in the statute for the original vote by the legislative body. So if it wasn't required for the initial vote, it would be required for an amendment.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Bissonnette. Councilor Murphy-Rambalati.
Well, I had two comments, and it wasn't directly related to whether or not it requires a public hearing. My first thought was I needed to double check, but I don't think we've invited the CPA chair and any other representatives to specifically kind of give an overview over what has it looked like over the last few years that we've actually done the CPA. So that was something I'm glad Councilor McGivern brought up, because I think that'd be a great order to file, to invite them into DGR and just give us an update as part of this educational kind of component to that. But then my other question, and this doesn't necessarily have to be answered tonight, maybe it's just more something that I need to double check, but in some of my research, if I remember correctly, the 1.5% that Holyoke is currently at is definitely lower than other percentages that other communities take, which is understandable. But I'm more curious if there's how many municipalities in our area are at 0.5%. I'm just wondering. I thought when I was doing my research, there's only one other community that does that. So that's just something that kind of, as I'm trying to figure out if I'll be voting in favor of this, because I want to make sure, like everyone else is saying, I want to make sure that the facts are clearly laid out to the residents. I think still, even though we've been doing CPA for a while, I don't think everyone understands that it's after the first $100,000 is someone. Whoa, that was weird. Okay, there's might be a ghost in City Hall, but that threw me off. Sorry, that we are just making sure that the information is being relayed. And I think a lot of people don't realize even exactly where the limits are, that, not everyone is getting taxed CPA until a certain point. So whatever we can do as a body to educate and continue to educate, if that means filing an order to invite our CPA in, that'd be great. So those are just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor, before recognizing Counselor Bacon, Counselor Rivera has joined us on Zoom. Counselor Bacon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since we're talking about the context of education relative to a potential ballot question, I would just like to be very clear and speak very loudly on behalf of the taxpayers that they have a fundamental right to weigh in on the taxes that they pay to support any and all programs of the city. So in the context that we're in, 1.5% may be a fairly common rate that is paid on the CPA, but let's remember that people's home values went up by a very large percentage, along with all of the fees and rates that we're all well aware of around gas, electric, and to say nothing of the regular food bills and gas for the car that people are paying. And so I think we have to look at the context we're in, which is also the context that we have the lowest income along with the highest property rates as far as our taxes go relative to the value of a home. So the feedback that I'm getting from homeowners who have paid off their homes is that they are being squeezed to simply remain in their home, given all of the things that I listed off and all of the increases that we've all been under for the last few years. And I don't think anybody's immune from it, but the folks that are on fixed incomes are the most negatively affected. And so I think it's only fair for us to give the voters an opportunity to weigh in on something that was something that the council voted on to put before them in the first place. So I think it's only a matter of fairness for us to check in 5 years later. I guess it would be 6, perhaps, by the time it would actually get on the ballot, to see how people are doing and how they feel about it. And this is not to say anything negative about projects that have gone through the CPA. It's simply a matter of letting the public weigh in on the effects, the benefits, and the current situation that they're in as it relates to continuing this in the same way going forward. So that would be my plea, that the council who put it before the voters, and there was a very large hardcore press to get it passed throughout the city, that at this point the voters get to weigh in now that the program's been here for a while. So thank you for your consideration.
Councilor Bacon. I see Megan has their hand raised. Megan?
I just wanted to answer one piece because I heard it mentioned. So we have 194 CPA communities across the Commonwealth, and 2 of them have a 0.5% surcharge. I have some information that I've been preparing to bring back to finance that's more detailed, but in short, 0.5% as a surcharge creates some funding difficulties around the way the legislation creates some categories, right? You have to have 10% towards housing, 10% towards historic preservation, 10% towards open space and recreation. And you can only spend up to 5% for your administrative costs. So if we did move forward with a 0.5% surcharge, there would be some real difficulties in terms of being able to fund projects from year to year. Because if a project came to us and it was $300,000, we wouldn't necessarily be able to afford that kind of project in a single year. It would take us a few years, right, to sort of get enough in any one category to be able to then fund anything within that category. It would also, I think, cause us to move some offsets into the city, Because if you, for example, like this year, if we only had a 0.5% surcharge, we would only be able to pay up to $13,000 in administrative costs. Our staffer currently costs a little over $16,000. So we would likely lose our staffer or have to really, severely decrease their hours. And that means having to shift those responsibilities to other city departments. So there would be offsets, whether directly or indirectly to that, or maybe we don't have someone that can do contracts anymore, so legal has to. Or we have to have our city solicitor, our assessor take over what we're doing with our finances and accounting because we can't afford to pay someone to do it anymore. There'd be things we'd really have to think through under that kind of reality. And so very few communities do that because it really puts you in a very, just hard to make it work with that little amount of funding.
Thank you, Megan. Before recognizing Councilor Israel Rivera, I know when we took up these orders, so as mentioned, like these orders are already being taken up in finance. And I know Megan just mentioned that, and she's getting ready to get a whole bunch of information for that. So I know, part of the goal to bring this up here is us as a committee to decide whether we want to continue the conversation in this committee, or I know Councilor Bacon mentioned one of them should be a leave to withdraw, and then the other ones can just go to finance or whatever we decide. So I just wanted to also put that in here. We're getting a lot of good information. I'm looking forward to the next finance meeting. I think it's going to be a good one. But yeah, I just wanted to, mention that. Councilor Israel Rivera.
Hey, thank you. I think just to speak in favor, like the CPA and the fact that it's helping the community, the city overall move in a direction that we've been working towards over the last several years. There are several projects that have come about, right, due to the CPA, and then there are some in the pipeline. Such as the Anniversary Hill project, some of the Springdale improvements, some of the other parks that get improved that do not fall in the CDBG zone. So like that, I just feel like it would be a travesty to even lower the rate of where the CPA is right now, because right now we are actually dealing with not as much money as we used to before when it first started. I think it would hurt us more than help us to actually bring it down to 0.5. But I totally hear Councilor Bacon's concerns with regards to rising prices with gas and sewage and our tax on homeowners. But ultimately, it's just, I don't know. This is a situation where I feel like you're getting more bang for your buck with the CPA when you're investing in that. But that's all I wanted to say with regards to that.
Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. And just through the chair to Megan, one of the questions that I would have is how much money is currently in CPA in each of the categories for when she comes to finance, not for tonight, because I do believe there are amounts in each of those at this point. So I think it would be good for us all to understand how much is there.
Cool.
Thank you.
Cool. Anyone else? See no one. Okay, so I think the motion,
Motion to give leave to withdraw to item 6.
Okay, that is a second. So leave to withdraw for item 6. All in favor?
Aye.
I hear aye from Todd. Aye. Okay, that's a 2-0. Yes. Leave to withdraw.
And then do you want to just table?
So then the questions for items 5 and 7, we either want to table it, or I'm not sure the procedure can be something like complied with, since it's being already in finance, give it to finance. I know that item 7 is in finance. Item 5 is one of the original ones from back in April that were put in here.
How about we give item 5?
Complied with, because
Complied
it's been
with.
taken up in finance.
Yeah.
Would be fine with me.
Do you think item 5 and 7 are considered complied with, or do you want to? table.
7 was copied to this committee, just to sort of keep track of.
Okay,
So I don't know what you want to do with that.
We can just comply.
we can say they're complied with.
Councilor McGivern.
If I remember correctly, at the full city council meeting, we sent something to charter and rules because there was a question of, does it have to go to charter and rules?
Yeah,
Jeff actually checked the minutes, and the original go around, everything was handled in finance.
So yeah, that was one of the questions I had when we started off the meeting, like if it has to be in the Charter and Rules Committee, and didn't get a yes that it has to be. And also, admin Jeffrey had told me, I guess one of the previous ballot questions was actually brought up through DGR. I'm not exactly sure which ballot question it was, but yeah, there is no hard rule on it has to be in Charter and Rules for
Okay.
ballot questions. So,
all right.
so complied with. Let's go for both.
The wizard corrected me, DGR.
What?
It wasn't?
The Wizard of Oz corrected me, DGR.
Oh, okay. Oh, the
Finance
wizard.
has got it this time.
I hear you. So is it, but it's okay if it stays in finance. It doesn't have to go to charter and rules. Okay, then,
Yeah, as long as the city council, which they did, put it there, it's fine.
okay. So motion to that item 5 and item 7 are complied with.
Okay, that is a second motion that item 5 and 7 are complied with. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Finally, I'm gonna have trouble getting in here. I could hear you, but I couldn't speak. So, motion second and aye. If I'm catching up on everything.
Perfect. You got it.
Sorry about that. The signal kept going out. I apologize.
All good.
Thank you, Todd. Okay, so those items 5 through 7. Thank you, Megan, for joining us tonight. We'll see you at the next
Thank
some
you.
finance meeting in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, counselors, appreciate it.
Motion to take items 1 through 4 off the table as a package.
Okay, motion to take those item 1 through 4 together as a
Second.
package. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Item 1 is order put in by me. We look at committee responsibilities and restructure, refer to charter and rules. Item 2 is that we have the following committees: zoning committee dealing with zoning changes in language, public way committee dealing with handicap spots, parking and traffic ordinances, development committee focusing on grants and economic development. Item 3 by Councilor Israel Rivera, order that the Honorable City Council add the following committees: 1, communications committee; 2, senior citizen quality of life committee. And then item 4 is that we create a cannabis committee to strictly deal with marijuana special permits and ordinance changes related to cannabis. So with all of these, I know on item 1, I'm ready to give it a complied with. That was like one of the first ones that I put in. So, I just want to state that. As far as...
Do you want me to make a motion that item 1 is complied with?
Sure. All in favor? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
So I believe that at our last meeting, we asked our administrative assistant to invite Matt Mainville, the head of the Holyoke Housing Authority, and Mike Moriarty, the executive director of One Holyoke CDC. So they're both here. I don't know if there was anyone else that we invited, so I apologize if I'm missing anyone.
That'd be for the Senior Citizen Quality of Life.
Yes, this is for the Senior Citizen Quality of Life Committee.
Okay, so we can go into item 3, which is by Israel Rivera, Communications Committee, Senior Citizen Quality of Life Committee. So as Councilor Murphy-Rambalati mentioned, both Matt Manville and Michael Moriarty are here. Go ahead, Ton. No, he's... do we have the? I don't know if Councilor Israel. I know we've had some discussion on this. We've taken it up twice already. I'm not sure if there's any new information for either committee. And I don't know if Matt or if Michael Moriarty had anything specific to say around the committees. You're more than welcome to. You can join.
Yeah, to be quite honest with you,
Come up to the microphone. So that everyone can hear you at home. You make sure the green light's on. Thank you so much for being here.
there we go. To be quite honest with you, I was excited to have received the invitation to participate in the conversation this evening, but being fairly unfamiliar with the scope of the discussion, I'm really just here to listen, to add anything I can. In general, I think it's a great idea. I think a communication committee would make sense. It is a vital issue in Holyoke, and is certainly something that's very near and dear to my heart, seeing as how I'm participating in the running of the housing authority in Holyoke. But other than that, I was just here as more of a responding to the invitation and trying to do my part.
Thank you. Councilor Murphy, Ron Belletti.
Oh, well, I actually see Todd.
Go ahead, Todd.
McGee. Todd,
Hear me?
there you go.
There we go. Sorry, this thing. We also, I think we're supposed to have Neve from the senior center. That's all I was going to say.
Oh, is that okay? I knew there was like
Yeah.
a handful of people that we said we were going to invite at the last meeting, and I couldn't remember if
Yeah.
everyone was here or not.
Okay.
Yeah, I do believe that was the other one.
Okay.
So I guess just to give a quick back.
Counselor Izzy's hand is up.
Why isn't the hands up here?
I'm watching it. Don't you worry. I got you. Your vice chair has you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Councilor Israel Rivero, go ahead.
Thank you. So I spoke to Neve earlier today. She called me. She said she couldn't make it tonight, but that I think they had said they have the Senior Citizen Advisory Council. That's something that they already pretty much kind of not exactly do, but their scope of work is kind of similar to what I laid out there for a commission. The idea behind that was for us as a body to be able to have the opportunity to mostly focus on this aspect of the community, just like we created the youth version, or we want to, just so that the senior citizens are fairly represented. And it's a way of being able to engage and inform them of things that are opportunities for them within the community. I spoke to her about it. She said that in collaboration, or with collaboration and all of us coming together, we would be able to help the Senior Citizen Advisory Council, if I'm saying it correctly, kind of meet some of these goals, because those are some of the goals that they have themselves. So I'm okay with either comply with or tabling it until just to have another conversation later on, just to see where it's at. But I think that's a whole different conversation that could be had. I'm glad that Mike's here and I'm glad that Matt's here to be able to listen. And at the same time, I would also like to hear from them what they would like to see with regards to some of that, because that would actually help Neve and the Senior Citizen Advisory Council with regards to engagement and outreach. I think one of the main things for me is that, like, Kevin filed some stuff in the beginning of the year of 2022 around some senior citizens that are homeowners being able to get tax breaks by working in some of their time off and getting by voluntary work for the city. And that's an opportunity that I think that more senior citizens in the community that have their houses paid off and have to pay taxes can actually take advantage of. I don't know the exact details about it, but I know that when Kevin brought it up, it was an awesome idea. So I just feel like those are the things that we're kind of missing out on with regards to outreach and engagement. And I felt like with this, we were able to do that, but it sounds like Neve and them are kind of on that. They just need some help with regards to organizing and reaching out. But that was what I wanted to be, my piece.
Thank you, Councilor Israel Rivera. So to just give like Matt and Michael, because they're both here, background as far as these committees. So these are committees So the idea behind them is committees that are for the city council. So we have right now the charter and rules, we have an ordinance committee, DGR, public service, and we were just looking. I know Councilor Rivera and I we put in some different committees that we feel like would help us in our jobs as city council. Just how Israel just mentioned. With that, I know with item 3, I know you just mentioned leave to withdraw. Since there is like sort of like a senior advisory committee or commission as you just stated, cool with that. But I am interested in a communications committee for our body, just making sure that, what we do as a body is being communicated properly and efficiently to the people of Holyoke. So I would almost want to just say yes to the communications committee. I'm not sure what the order would be around that. Great question. Great question. Go ahead.
I was just gonna see if Mike he took himself off mute, so I didn't know if Mike wanted to chime in.
Go ahead, Attorney Bissonnette.
No, sorry, Mike Moriarty.
Let's go ahead, Mr. Moriarty.
Sure. And, actually, the only reason I'm on mute is because I'm alone here in the office, so there's not going to be any background noise. But, I'm always interested in seeing what can be done in any arm of city government to communicate better. I think the challenges that we see regularly with civic engagement throughout the city and with, just knowing how hard it is to know any particular thing is going on. It's something that needs to be constantly thought about, constantly studied and acted on. So, I can definitely see merit in being very mindful of that.
So I'm wondering if the committee is interested, we can ask Attorney Bissonnette for some language as to the communications committee, so that we can look at it at the next charter and rules, and possibly have it be part of our committee one of our committees come springtime. That'd be the motion to send. Go ahead, Councilor Puello.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to understand for clarity, so that so when I'm typing my email out to my constituents for a little summary thing here. So this is for a committee that we can add, just how we have the charter and rules and ordinance and all these other committees. I mean, I'm just wondering, is there an order that somebody wants to file that can't be filed already through an existing committee? Like, I'm just trying to better understand, like, what, is there an order that can't be filed currently to one of the, like, a public service or development of government, DGR, or I don't understand.
I don't know. The order would be this one, to create the communications committee and focus on communication to the constituents.
Right. So I guess to restate my question, I mean, so I get that, but I'm trying to understand. So the committee would serve as a committee that currently serves now. So, like, for example, charter and rules, somebody files an order and it's discussed in charter and rules. I mean, is there an order that can't be filed that needs to be taken up specifically in a communications committee or in some other senior citizens committee that can't be taken up in a regular committee? Like, if we've got actual ideas, I mean, it'd be great to hear them. I'm just not sure what purpose an extra committee serves. I mean, I'm trying to better understand this.
Councilor Murphy-Rambalati.
Well, all I'm going to say, and I see that the maker of the order has his hand raised, but my understanding is that it's not, I guess this is where I could see a communications committee being useful, is it's more about how you get the word out and which partners you're working with and, like, who's at the table and what is the way that we're delivering our information to the public. Is it by organizing more community events? Are we? I mean, as much as, like, I do agree that we should always consider what the committee responsibilities look like, and I think that's what Councilor Maldonado-Velez was sort of hoping that the he could work with the law department on figuring out what that looks like. But I think for me, like, I think there needs to be a lot of transparency around what our process is for getting information out, and any kind of like bigger initiatives or movements or education that needs to be done. I would see the communications committee as being more about figuring out how you do that, rather than, you know, actually just having a meeting about things to, because like, you're not going to have just like another meeting. The point is that people don't always tune into these meetings. They don't know that these meetings are going on. So like, how do we let people know that these meetings are going on? And that's just me. I'm not the maker of the order. So those are just my thoughts.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the ask for the asking the attorney to write the language. I know this has been tabled twice. It was first taken up in June. Not sure if you were around, but like, you know, we mentioned how there were other cities that have way more committees, and not necessarily we're trying to get to like that point. But realizing how can we be more efficient and intentional as far as like the committees that we do have, because there are some committees that have barely even met this year. So, Councilor Israel Rivera and then Councilor Bacon.
So for me, the idea in following the order came from my information management class that I'm taking in my master's in public administration program. Statistics in my class or in the book that I read, I can get you a copy of it if you like. I can make some photocopies or whatnot. They're saying that most municipalities are moving in a direction focusing on communications, mostly because of how social media and how the websites are now evolving. The way that government is now servicing their constituency is now evolving too as well. There's this thing called e-government, and communications falls under that. So my idea with this was to start moving in that direction for the future. If you pay attention to some of the emails that we get from MMA, there's a conference coming up in January that they're going to be talking about a lot of this stuff this January, matter of fact, at that conference. If you have more questions around that, I suggest you attend, so that way they'll be able to explain it a lot better than I can right now, because I'm learning it, most of it, within the process where I'm at school. But the idea for me is a lot of that. When we start evolving and moving to the directions where we start doing more e-government services, because we already do that. But when we start leveling up to another level, we need to be already prepared for that. And that was the idea for me, is trying to get a couple steps ahead. But if it's not, if it's a nuisance, if it's a waste of time, I hear it. You know what I mean? I don't want to waste anybody's time. I spend a lot of time in these meetings already as it is. But I think for me, this is something that's going to help the city later on in the future, just to help siphon the way we put out our information and how we try to be transparent for our constituents with regards to outreach and engagement. We have a lot of videos on YouTube with regards to what we do on city council. All of that should be under communications, how it's managed, where it's stored. I understand that those are some people's jobs, but like if there's a body around it, making sure that this is all being planned out and we're doing a strategic plan on how this is going to look like in the future. For me, I feel like that would only be good for the city. But if it's too soon and a tall order for us to do right now, I get it. I understand that.
Councilor Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through the chair to the maker of the order, I guess I'm just trying to understand. I totally see the ideas behind the order as they relate to operations and the day-to-day running of the city and the communications out at council. So I guess where I'm a little bit lost is what would maybe be an example of an order that somebody would file that would go to this committee? Because we don't have committees that run day-to-day operations. They respond to orders filed by somebody. So I'm just trying to understand or picture what an order that would get sent to communications would look like. Could you?
Can I respond, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Councilor.
I know Mr. McGivern is waiting, but I think a perfect example would be the IT contract itself for the city, right? That right there on itself is having that come in through the communication committee, reviewed with the mayor and everything else, and making sure that everything is falling in line with what the strategic plan is that we would have in the future. If you think that doesn't make sense, then I guess it doesn't make sense to you. But hey, to me, like, I don't know what's happening until it comes to our plate, and then by that time, sometimes it's too late when it comes to some of that stuff. But that for me is a perfect example with regards to that. Reviewing it, it's about putting out the information for the people so that they know what's going on. And if we're not informing the people how we're spending their tax dollars, then I don't know.
I want to weigh in real quick. I mean, one order I have in mind too is, I mean, I said it from the beginning, and I've spoken with Jeffrey around it, just like as far as like transparency and communication and clarity around like the orders that we have within the chambers. I know Councilor Rivera just mentioned like e-governance and like really a lot of these like platforms that we don't utilize to the full extent, and I feel like that's really a communication, because it's city council. How do we communicate what's happening outside of city council to the general public? And I think we mentioned education earlier with another order. I know a lot of us, we have our constituents, we're writing emails, we're doing what we're doing, but the reality is, I'm going to go ahead and assume that even with the 13 of us, we still don't have access to all 40,000 people in our city. So like, how do we make it so that body as a whole, the government as a whole, has access or is communicating to the whole city, not just the ones that are voting for us? Because the city's bigger than just the 8,000 that show up to vote. Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Councilor. And but first, the Councilor Rivera and everyone that's spoken in favor or why this is a proposal before us, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. The issues are the issues, and communication and transparency and the way we deal with the future and the present is all part of what we do. I think the other topic, though, and not just for this particular order, but for any creation of a new committee, we have to think about carefully, and I'll explain briefly. When I first joined the then Board of Aldermen, we had 23 subcommittees, and it was a mess. Now, granted, we didn't have Jeffrey Anderson Burgos to make sense out of all those 23 committees. However, things got lost. Meetings were difficult to schedule. Some people served on 5 or 6 different committees. It becomes a numbers game. And we had a long discussion about that back in it was the late 80s, early 90s. And that's when we came up with we called the Fab Five standing committees. Now, we have expanded the Fab Five over the years and made some special committees. The joint committee with the schools was a great idea, and it works out very well. There's other smaller and more focused committees. But if you keep adding a committee for every topic, and all of a sudden you're running out of nights to have meetings on. I mean, we have an ordinance committee that has an incredible amount of work when it comes to zoning petitions and the ordinance and laws that they have to review. We have a finance committee that has a lot that goes through it, because we set the bar high for transfers within the department during the fiscal year. There are reasons about that, but it does cause scheduling problems. We have a DGR committee that meets a lot, public safety, public service, all serve purposes and all meet, on a fairly regular basis. So I'm just issuing caution or need to not justify why Councilor Rivera is proposing this. It's a great idea, and I think but if we can incorporate it into one of our standing committees, and maybe with our video catalog, we can find a better way of subtitles, so when people are looking for a topic, they'll be able to search through those videos and find the topic a little bit more readily. Just food for thought.
Thank you, Councilor McGivern. So I know we weren't going to make the final choice on this today. We we're gonna ask Attorney Bissonette to send us back some language for the next meeting for the Communications Committee. So we still have another discussion coming up on it before it goes to the full council. Not counselor, sorry. I know Michael Moriarty has their hand up. Go ahead, Michael.
Thank you. Listening to Councilor McGivern reminded me of an experience many years ago, I think 12 or 13 years ago, on the school committee. We also at one time had a very large number of subcommittees, and in fact it was structured so that we made sure every member of the school committee had a committee to chair. For some of the committees, that seemed to be almost the whole point of it. When we reduced the number of committees, we did find that the scheduling became a lot more manageable. But I think what we also found is that you had to find a home for almost any topic that came up. And so the agendas on the smaller number of committees, we reduced it to 4 standing committees, started to just get longer and longer. It pushes and pulls in both ways. I would just say that, restate to you that I think getting the word out to people in this community that hasn't had a daily public newspaper in a couple of decades now is an unending challenge. And, if you meet and file orders to some specific ends, I think you might get a result that you're pretty happy with. This balancing off the number of committees you have, you really do have to look at the forest for the trees, because, one way or another, as city councilors, when I was a school committee members, you still only get the same 24 hours in a day. So you gotta make it work.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So that was item 3. So right now, it's not complied with. We're just gonna ask Attorney Bissonette or the motion would be to ask Attorney Bissonette to send us back some language for the next meeting around the possible communication committee. Second, would that be possible, Attorney Bissonette?
Next committee meeting, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So item 3 can be tabled.
Motion to table item 3.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So it's 2-0. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
So feel strongly about Councilor Rivera's Communications Committee for item 2, Zoning, Public Way Committee, Development Committee. Those 3 I am okay with. Leave to withdraw.
Motion to give item 2 leave to withdraw.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This case 2-0. Okay, and then item 4. So from our last meeting, I believe we had asked Attorney Bissonette for language to form the Cannabis Committee. I'm not sure if I haven't received anything. I'm not sure if there is anything, Attorney Bissonette.
No, on this one, there's nothing specific yet.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Reagan.
Thank you. So relative to item 4, I would simply note that right now we only have 2 new applications in front of us in ordinance, and they're on the agenda for January 24th. And I think it is safe to say that the number and volume and frequency of the applications has slowed significantly since we began taking them up. How many years ago was it now? 3 or 4? So I think that has become more manageable in terms of time and accomplishing that work. So I think we're actually in pretty good shape for that.
Anyone else? I agree that it has slowed down from when we first started. I think we had one meeting where we literally just did marijuana special permits. But it's just the way I see this one specifically, just because the cannabis laws are changing like quarterly or biannually, just to have that one specific committee to really make sure that that is their focus. I always go back to how we started on the council with the Scrivener's error. Not to say that having this cannabis committee would have avoided that, but having a committee that maybe just focuses on that may have helped avoid that. I know there's going to be social consumption is a ballot question that's on here, but that's something that's being talked about around the state. We talk about the cannabis impact fee, like the process around that. So I think there is a opportunity for this, and even in our last meeting when we talked about having a sort of like a subcommittee type situation with cannabis, I think we can. It still has a place at this moment. So that's where I'm at with the cannabis. Councilor Puello.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just repeat what I said for the last, the last items. I mean, I think if, the name of the committee really just, I think it doesn't matter too much, as much as the orders that are being filed. I think that if there's something that we as councilors want to keep track of, we can just file the orders, and it could, it could be sent to any number of our committees so we can talk about it and keep track of it and follow it up appropriately, and, just make sure we're not adding more layers and chairmanships and all these different positions. I just think we can just file these orders to keep track of these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Puello. And I think even following that, I know ordinance, being part of the ordinance committee, there's orders on there. Even if I was chair, regardless of how we feel about the special orders, like it's not possible to take up every order. So trying to alleviate even the conversations, because even the special permits themselves, even if we just have two, we know special permits, there's a presentation that'll take 30 to 45 minutes. So even if it's just two special permits, we're still spending at least 2.5 hours on those topics. Councilor Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just respectfully disagree. I do not think we need a separate committee for one book of business in the city. I mean, we have many businesses that have regs changes, different considerations and concerns, and the Scrivener's error that you refer to didn't happen initially. It happened under a previous chair with number of changes being attempted at the same time in a complex ordinance. And so I don't think it was a function of how many items were in the committee. I think it was a function of so many changes being attempted at one time in a fairly complex ordinance. But nonetheless, I think in the last year, things have been done thoroughly, clearly, and I think the results have been clean and complete. And so I just think it gets hard to start making very narrow focused committees when I couldn't even get a subcommittee out of the ordinance committee to look at that. So I don't know. I just think I take your point, but I think we're in a place where we can manage it successfully at this point. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? So with this one in particular, still waiting on the language so we can have the final vote from Attorney Bissonnette. So right now we will need language on the Communications Committee from item 3, and then on a Cannabis Committee. And then we can hopefully vote on out of the committee those two at the next Charter and Rules.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
So a motion to ask Attorney Bissonnette to draft some language for a Cannabis Committee, which will also include the cannabis impact fee in the definition of it.
Okay.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, cool. Thank you.
Motion to take item 8.
So motion to take up item 8. This is a item put in by Councilor Israel Rivera. Order that the city solicitor's office begin drafting a ballot question for next election cycle around marijuana social consumption sites such as bars and cafes for residents to vote on next election cycle. Similar to the language below, that the sale of marijuana products as those terms are defined in GLC 94G1 for consumption on the premises where sold is permitted when the sale occurs at restaurants, bars, cafes, or any establishment in which food or beverages are served. We do have Councilor Rivera here. I believe Sean may be here for this order.
Yes.
Because they just so I'm not sure if either of them would like to speak.
So for me, the intention with following the order is trying to get ahead of the curve. When this opens up and the opportunity opens up for the other municipalities that are surrounding, a lot of businesses are going to be running to try to get these permits and licenses, so that it's going to be a new thing, a new booming situation. So I feel like for us as Paper City and then as a community that is kind of welcoming to the marijuana industry, it would only be right for us to try to get ahead of it so that we could try to help our businesses take advantage of the upcoming situation when it arises. That's the idea for me with it, at least.
Thank you, Councilor Rivera. Sorry, not Councilor Sean. Director of Board of Health, Sean Gonzalez. Is there anything you would like to add?
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. This is a topic that, while it hasn't been seriously fielded yet, by the council, it was referenced in the language that Massachusetts initially passed. There was this little clause in there. So when the law that was enacted that allowed for the sale of recreational cannabis came in, there's this little clause that mentioned a pilot for social consumption, and then that really hasn't been acted upon by the state in any capacity since then. I'm not aware of any social consumption pilots that have been undertaken by any communities in the Commonwealth, and so it was there as like a little tidbit, and I know a lot of people have talked about it. I am going to break down, I think, maybe my response or my concerns into two halves, and one half is going to be pre-existing, I think, legal concerns that you're going to run into, or red tape, however you want to describe it. And I think the other half is going to be just some base public health issues. So for me to start, I'll start with the legal concerns because they're a little bit more tangible in the fact that they're already pre-existing and they can be referenced directly. The way that this question is sort of couched as specifically being in places where food and beverages are served. You have the Smoke-Free Workplace Law, which is Session Law Acts of 2004, Chapter 137. So that was the language that banned smoking in bars and restaurants in 2004 in Massachusetts. Pretty broad, sweeping language. And it prohibits smoking in a number of areas, but specifically as it speaks to places where food are served. I'm just going to read off the ones that I picked out of there because they represent sort of where this would arise, the challenge. Specifically bans smoking in cafeterias, cafes, coffee shops, food courts or concessions, supermarkets, retail food outlets, bars, taverns, or in a place where food or drink is sold to the public and consumed on premises as part of a business required to collect state meals tax on the purchase, which is pretty much everywhere that sells food or drink. And when they define smoking, they specifically have the definition to include non-tobacco product designed to be combusted and inhaled. And in several places on mass.gov, they reference the fact that that is to include marijuana. There are some exceptions or exemptions that are written into that, such as smoking bars, which are a little bit more complicated than just a bar that you smoke at. They have some specific rules, and there are not very many of them in the state. It wasn't designed to create a bar that you can just have a cigarette at. There are some other rules that make it sort of a place that you smoke that incidentally has food and drink, as opposed to a regular bar or a restaurant in which you can have a cigarette or another non-tobacco combustible, as they're going to define it. But those exemptions were specifically prohibited by a couple of Board of Health regulations that were passed by the Holyoke Board of Health in late 2016 and 2017. So there's two regulations. One is the regulation of the Holyoke Board of Health restricting the sale of tobacco products, and the other is called regulation prohibiting smoking in workplaces and public places. So those regulations were passed by the board in conjunction with an attorney that worked for the Mass Health Officers Association. And they prohibit smoking in smoking bars, retail tobacco stores, in a 100-foot buffer around municipal building entrances, municipal-owned parks, playgrounds, municipal-owned athletic field, beaches, membership associations, nursing homes, hotels, motels, B&B rooms, outdoor areas where food and/or beverages are served to the public by employees of restaurants, bars, and taverns, and public transportation. So you have a law on a state level that sort of prohibits it in all but a few exempted areas, and you have some local regulations that prohibit smoking under that same definition that's present in the smoke-free workplace law to include non-tobacco combustibles that sort of bans them in all other places that would have qualified under the exemption. So that's the same reason hookah bars are not allowed. We don't have any smoking bars. We don't have any membership smoking associations in Holyoke because they were all sort of precluded by this regulation that was actually passed before marijuana was legalized. So they sort of saw part of that coming and it was banned there. And then I think the final issue, I don't work for the license board, and I will admit in advance that my understanding of the ABCC's regulations are limited, but I would think that in a bar, allowing the sale of marijuana or other combustibles would be, it would place that bar out of compliance with their liquor license. So
I don't think you'd be able to do both at the same time.
right, and for me,
So it would be a separate permit and a separate license. And I just, again, for me, it's just putting it on the ballot and having the constituents have the right to vote on it, on whether they want it or not. Whether it happens, that's a different story later on down the road. But again, giving the constituents a choice to actually be able to express their voice with regards to this. Because I do remember that 2016 local ban that the public health locally did. And again, if that was something that could be put on the ballot that the people could vote on, I'm sure the people would voice their opinion very wholeheartedly on how they, which way they would like that to be too as well with regards to all of that stuff. But that's a ship that has sailed. Right now, for me, it's just pretty much trying to give the people the opportunity to vote on this and give the businesses the opportunity to feel like that we're moving in that direction if it's ever going to be feasible for Holyoke. If it's ever going to be feasible. If a new board comes along and decides to choose that they want to do something different and go in a different direction, we've already done the legwork for them to be able to do that. If not, then we can't do it then, I guess, right? That'd be the thing. But for me, it's just trying to get things in the motion so that way when we're moving, and we start to do things, we can continue to move with whatever we start to do instead of saying that we don't have capacity or saying that we need more help in this to be able to move in that direction. For me, it's about getting ahead of the curve instead of waiting for the curve to get to us to then start moving. But thank you.
Sure. I also think that maybe tweaking some of the language might open up some of the possibilities a little more. It's just that anchoring it to places where food and drink are sold poses a lot of, encounters a lot of pre-existing legal language there.
What I'm hearing is, so like at the state level, there may be a social consumption clause type thing, but even if it gets passed, like locally, we have certain laws that will prohibit a lot of these things. So I think with following, if we were to put it up to the voters, it's also just being very clear, we're asking because if it's a yes, then there's these other things that we need to take care of as well and deal with. I know Councilor Givner, you're here. Didn't realize you were here. So everyone, Councilor Givner is here and on Zoom. I'm sorry, and she just had her hand raised.
I took it down because you basically covered what I was going to ask about. So,
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councilor Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just note, too, that when we passed the local ordinances relative to the smoking, it was in the context that we have still, I believe, one of the higher asthma rates in the city. And it was part of the whole green communities, getting our air quality improved. And unfortunately, there are studies out there that indicate that the smoke from marijuana has carcinogenic properties in a similar way to that of cigarettes. And so there's other health considerations to take into account as well that were part of the context under which our current non-smoking ordinances were created. So I think and I personally wouldn't support this because I think it's in contradiction to what we're trying to do as a community and being healthy. But if it was to move forward on the ballot, I think it would have to be made clear that, it is an opinion ballot, but that also I think it would be misleading for people to think that it could actually happen.
Thank you, Councilor Bacon. Councilor Murphy Rambalari.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I really do appreciate, Sean, your insight to the existing ordinances and, just the suggestion that perhaps in its current form, this language might not be the best way to frame it. I also think it's worth noting that this language also doesn't really say anything necessarily about smoking. There's other ways to consume cannabis that are not involving, any kind of smoke inhalation or concerns about that end. So just, for what it's worth, I want to remind folks of that. But I wasn't sure. I do see Sean's hand up, Chair, but I don't know if there's any updates that Attorney Bissonnette may be able to offer as it relates to what is going on the state level. Councilor Rivera mentioned the Mass Municipal Association conference in a couple weeks, and there's actually a panel about the future of some of these laws, and I will be there, so should be fun. But yeah, that was kind of my question. I don't know. I know that there was a lot of discussion over the summer and into the fall, so I just wanted to see if there was an update on what other municipalities are doing.
Attorney Bissonnette.
Well, right now, no one is doing anything.
Okay.
The CCC had put out regulations in 2019, but as Sean points out, there was a flaw in the referendum law that basically said municipal initiative petition procedures, and for 2/3 of the 350 communities in Massachusetts, they don't exist. So that was a flaw which was corrected in the most recent reform bill that went into effect in November. CC had identified 15 communities or a dozen communities that were going to be pilot programs. That's off the boards now. The regulations are back for review before the CCC. They're not looking to push this forward at this point. They've got a lot of things on their plate, new staff, new chairperson, dealing with social equity issues, trying to deal with the shakeout in the industry right now. As one staffer said to me today, this is nothing, wait till Amazon and the federal laws change. Amazon can do delivery. A lot of people go out of business then. So it's ever changing. I'm not worried about seeing social consumption happening very quickly for a lot of the reasons Sean mentioned. Let me point out though, if you did want a question on the ballot, you need to get on for this year at the end of September, 40 days before the November election, for it to go before the voters. It can be advisory. It doesn't have to be binding. The change has been made now that the community legislative body can approve it with or without a referendum. Generally speaking, referendum is preferred by CCC, but when and if they issue regulations to operate these particular licensees, that's a good question. There's a lot of things on their agenda in front of this issue, so Clearly, you can pre-apply now if you want a social consumption license. They are taking pre-certifications, but there's no indication that that's going to happen any time in the next year or two. So if you want to get your referendum, you can, but I wouldn't count on seeing a shop open anytime soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Attorney Bissonnette. Sean, you have your hands raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, as I had discussed at a previous meeting, we did request some community impact funding to explore and kind of help to guide some of the marijuana decisions by hiring an outside consulting firm to do so. And while that is still sort of trickling through the process, that is a possibility. If the city did want to put something on the ballot in an advisory capacity, or they did want to sort of explore what could be possible, those resources could be made available to do that through the impact fees.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Councilor Rivera.
I just wanted to say thank you to both Sean and Mike for being here and providing their insight with regards to the order. Again, I filed the order just to try to get ahead of the wave. If the things is not happening right now, we can't actually do anything right now, then you can table it, have conversations about the future, or try to work around, see what issues we have, if it's something that we have to do. There are certain things that, obviously it looks like there are certain bridges that we have to cross before that ever came into effect anyway, so it's just maybe mapping that out later on. But again, thanks Mike and thanks Sean. There's a lot of work to do what you guys do. And I appreciate you guys giving the time to be here at this time. It's late at night and you don't technically have to be here. So thank you again.
Thank you, Councilor Rivera. I know there have been questions in the past that are non-binding, that are sort of we can't even technically do because the state doesn't allow it. So this can be one of those. I think Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti made a good point that, consuming marijuana is not just by smoking it. There's, many different ways that it can be done as well. I'm wondering if the committee, Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti and myself right now, are interested in just asking Attorney Bissonnette for language that, as for a ballot question, that we can discuss at the next Charter and Rules Committee.
Sure. So we can motion to table.
So motion to ask Attorney Bissonnette for language for a ballot question for item 8 for our next Charter and Rules meeting.
Second.
Would that work, Attorney Bissonnette?
Yes, we'll set it up both ways, both binding and non-binding. You can take your choice from the language. I'll check with the Secretary of State to make sure we get the right language.
Thank you. And then the motion would be to table.
Motion to table item 8.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay. Thank you. That's 2-0.
Motion to take item 9.
10,
Oh, sorry. 9 to, do you want to do 9, 10, 11?
Just 9, 10, 11, and then the other two. So motion to take up 9, 10, and 11 together as a package.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Any opposed? No. Item 9 is order put in by myself that we create a ballot question asking if there should be a recall process for all elected officials. The question should include a recall process and the decision should be binding. Item 10 is ordered that recall provisions be established for every elected official in the city. These provisions should be fair and equitable to allow citizens a path to recall, but also protect the system from nuisances. And item 11, order that we add to our charter that if a councilor is absent from full council meeting for more than 3 consecutive meetings without written notice, their seat is considered open. Recall process has been brought up a couple times, even before my time on the council. For the mayor, primarily, I believe in a recall process. I believe the voters should have a way for if a councilor is not either doing their work or they're not available or whatever it is, to have some sort of process outlined for them so that they can recall an elected official and have another person step in. There's communities all over Massachusetts that have recall processes for 2-year appointments, 4 years. So it can be done. Some of them require like a 10% signature from constituents. And then the elections themselves can vary differently. Some of them you have the election of the person itself that's already in there with newcomers that are trying to replace them. Some have it that once that person's out, then the typical filling in the vacant seat comes in. So it can be either, this is the initial conversation and trying to figure out a recall process. I do believe, I know I put in order back in June, Councilor Puello and Bacon put in order in October. So I think we're on the same page that there could be a recall process. But then the most recent order was to make it a ballot question, because I do believe it should be a ballot question and people should decide if there should be a recall process or not. So that's sort of my thoughts, my initial thoughts on this right now. If anyone else wants to say anything. Councilor Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I wholeheartedly agree with you on this. So every once in a while, we all find common ground, right? I think the challenge is just getting the language and having our mayor embrace the concept. Because regardless of what the vote is, this is my best understanding of the law, and Attorney Bissonnette can correct me if I have it an incorrect understanding. Regardless of what the voters say, regardless of what the city council says, even unanimously, the mayor must advance the language in order for it to go anywhere. So I'm not discounting or against. I mean, I'm all in favor of having our citizens weigh in on most, if not everything. I mean, we are here for them, right? They're not here for us. So, but I wouldn't want to suggest by putting it on the ballot that if they do all want it, that it's that simple, because I still think, unless Attorney Bissonnette can advise us otherwise, that they still wouldn't trump those other steps, but I'll defer to our attorney.
Go ahead, Attorney Bissonnette.
Yeah, the mayor would have the veto.
Okay, so, but I do support it. I think especially the longer the terms are, the more I think it is necessary that there be some vehicle for recourse on the part of the citizens.
Thank you. Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti.
Thank you. I am also in favor of this. I think before, when it was discussed in the past, it was unfortunate that the city council was kind of left out of that equation. So it is good to see that we all can agree that we should have a path to recall for every elected official if necessary. But I guess my question, and I don't know who I'm asking this question to, but it's more of if I would be more comfortable with all of this if we also establish what happens in the event that someone is successfully recalled. Is it now a special election? Is it someone who is appointed by the city council? I don't really know what that looks like. And obviously, if it is a special election, we need to make sure that the city has the money in the budget to have a special election. So there's just a lot of things that come after, what happens if someone is actually recalled. So those would be my major points at this time.
Thank you. I think I've been thinking about that, and Attorney Bissonnette can correct me if I'm wrong, but right now, if we were to do a recall process where it's just how do we essentially recall, how do we open up a seat? Then the current law will go in where it's we select right now the council. If someone were to leave a seat right now, then the rest of the councilors would appoint someone for the empty seat. So that's where it would be right now. Now, there are other orders on here, or items 12 and items 13 that sort of have that talk about that, like after the recall process. I think, the reason why, like you said, take up item 12 and 13 separately from this is, I think, figuring out one, like what is that recall process? Because I think other things we can discuss doesn't necessarily have to be with, I don't want to say it doesn't have to be those citizens weigh in, like we can still do public hearings and stuff, but I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a ballot question. That's just me personally. I think if we want to have it be like, we need 50 signatures to fill a vacancy, that can be something we decide on here. Unless we want to make it part of the ballot question and outline it saying, this is the recall process and this is what would happen afterwards. But I think those are two separate sort of processes, because a seat can open up without the recall process. So, Councilor Will Puello.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say, I want to thank Councilor Bacon for co-filing this with me. And I think my main question was, the one that she asked was, if the mayor still had a say in the veto, because if that's the case, I mean, with respect, I think we could probably just bypass having the election and get this done for people a lot sooner, and just having this process all set. If we can make sure that the mayor's on board, I don't know if anybody wants to reach out to him or figure out that side of it. But I think if we can just take care of that, I think that having a ballot question is kind of, a moot point. I think that we all agree this is a good thing. The one thing I do want to say is, well, two things. I would want to see something where the council still appoints. And then the second thing I want to say is, I'm a little worried about item 11 here. I think we definitely have to have a broader discussion on that. I mean, what does written notice mean? Like, do I need to send a letter on my behalf? Do I need to call the president? What's considered an open seat? I mean, is it vacant? So I definitely think legally that needs to be etched out pretty carefully there. Thank you.
For sure. That's why we're here. Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Chair MALDONADO-VELEZ. I have concerns, and we've had this discussion in the past, as you pointed out, about a recall especially when it comes to a 2-year term. It's not as easy as it sounds. When is elected for a 2-year term, you start January 1st. If you were to have a recall election, you have to, there's a time scheduling problem that immediately comes into it. You have to give X amount of time for that particular recall election to take place. Then there's talk about having an election to replace if the voters, if they choose to recall someone, and taking out papers. Now if the city clerk were here, she could probably do this better than me, but all of a sudden this whole process becomes close to 6 or 7 months minimum. And now that doesn't allow a lot of time for campaigning, doesn't allow a lot of time for people to get to know the people who are looking to seek the replacement for the vacancy itself. So to me, and this is what we discussed the first go around, recall, whether you believe in it or you don't believe in it, doesn't make sense for a 2-year term. It just doesn't work mathematically. The 4-year term is what seemed to be the focus on the last time we looked at this, and that was the advent of the mayor becoming a 4-year term. It's not the only position, but it's the position that I think we all focused on, and that was the one that we did pass, and that was the one that was vetoed by the mayor. And it's not, I don't think it's more than just a veto. I think it's like a charter change. If the mayor says no, it's a no. But my concerns, number one, it doesn't work with a 2-year term. Number two, 4-year terms, I think consideration has to be given, but recall can become and I said this at the full city council meeting when someone started the discussion, a recall election or a recall option can become very political, and not always for the right reasons. And obviously the voters choose what's the right reasons, and it just becomes, to me, again, becomes with 2-year terms, a scheduling problem, and with 4-year terms, I think we have to think about, how do you get the recall on the ballot? How do you legitimize it? Maybe it means X amount of signatures for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McGivern. I do want to say I'm blanking on the name, but there are communities that do have recall process for 2-year terms. So I do want to say like it is possible. What would that look like for our city? Will probably be very different from the other communities, but you know it is a possibility. You know, I just if you know the recall process, I think the conversation can still be going, and we should definitely keep this conversation going, but I do believe that something can be done to recall. Like there should be that vehicle, that tool that the citizens of Holyoke do have if an elected official is not doing, and I'm going to say not doing what they're supposed to be doing, because what exactly are we supposed to be doing? But if you're doing something that is negatively impacting the whole community, you know, the community should have a way to do something about it. So that's just really where I'm at with it. Is there anyone else? What? No, I'm too loud. So I think with that, I would like to table it to the next meeting. Well, they're really, I mean, we still, because it's, we're doing items 9 through 11 together. So we can talk about the recall process. If we were to do the ballot question, my order is around including a recall process. I think we can either ask for like a sample ballot question with a sample recall process from Attorney Bissonnette, or if you want to talk further what a recall process is. Because right now, I know with Councilor Bacon and Puellos, it just talks about creating a fair and equitable one. Mine was around 3 consecutive meetings. As far as like written notice and all that stuff, you know, we can decide what that looks like, an email, a napkin, I don't know, whatever it is to say that, you know, I'm still here, even though I'm not present at the meetings. So, Councilor McGivern.
Just, you know, to point out, it's not just doing a ballot question. This is a charter change. I think the committee knows that, and it's a little bit more cumbersome, and we need the state legislature, you know, to approve the change also. And they will require a ballot question because it changes our form of government significantly.
I guess my request would be, if we wanted to table and ask Brenna to come to the next meeting, because I know she may have more information around.
Yeah, that's fine. And then, you know, in the meantime, I mean, I'm personally I would also like the chance to do a little bit more research into other communities that do have a recall process for 2-year elected officials. I mean, the reason why I definitely want to explore this is because I was contacted by so many people in the community at large, just wondering what our process is and why we don't have a recall option in place for city council. And so I can definitely appreciate Councilor McGivern's points, but I do think having the opportunity to just keep talking about this and seeing what other communities do is important. So I would be open to tabling this and inviting the city clerk to join us or weigh in before, you know, at the next meeting.
Councilor McGee.
Because you're looking at 9, 10, and 11, and you're going to table those 3. And I guess my issue would be is, you know, we're inviting the clerk in for more information, but at the same time, are we referring anything out to legal to be drafted? Are we looking for... It kind of just says if we just table it, it's...
Yeah.
No, I know what that. So we did ask legal for 3 other questions, and not to say that I know Attorney Bissonnette could handle this one. I just think with this one, as a committee, we just want more information from the city clerk before asking like what's, because part of the, if we were to do a ballot question, it's also putting a recall process. I know Councilor McGivern just mentioned, you know, having to petition the state, all those sort of things. So I don't know if there's anything right this moment to, as a step, invite. Brenna, unless you believe.
Well, no, I guess also, going back to, the council did do a lot of work a few times already on a recall provision that was sent over and then there was no action taken. Are we looking to get that one back, that version back, to review it again as a group? And then
I'm open to revisiting that version, and then, but also knowing that these orders are calling for all elected officials, so I think that would be the major difference. But
and I guess that's my point. Is
Yeah.
a lot of work was done in prior years and sent out as a group. Now, if we want to tweak it, that's fine.
Yeah.
We're tabling something when there is something out there. I'd say, for motion purposes, table these three or two, whatever you're going to do, bring back that version so everyone can review it again. Get legal to draft, start putting it all together, and then say, okay, we scrap everything, start over, or we add in to what has already been done. That's how I'm trying to.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to.
Bacon has her hands up.
Councilor Bacon.
Yes, and I agree, it would be useful to look at the language that was drafted and then it could be edited, but I don't want to sound negative, but if we don't have the mayor warm to the concept, we're all going to be spending a lot of time and effort on this for naught. So I kind of think maybe between now and the next meeting, we see if he's warm to the concept. Because
and that is, as well as part of the motion, also maybe inviting the mayor in or just getting an answer.
Because it's a full stop if he's not.
Yep.
And it might be he just can't answer it. And once again, what version are you putting before you? The one that was already done, or are you tweaking it and maybe just bring him in and try and get everyone on the same page?
Okay.
See, it's just if we just table it, just
no, I feel you. Okay, so based on what I'm hearing, a motion would be to, one, I would say invite both city clerk and the mayor to the next meeting, along with getting a copy of what was sent to the mayor as far as like the previous recall processes, and then asking legal to look at that process that's in front of them and possibly add it to include all elected officials. And then we can review it and have it in front of us at our next meeting.
Okay.
Cool.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Attorney Bissonnette, did you get that?
I did, thank you.
Thank you. Cool. So items 9, 10, and 11 would be
Table based
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
Oh, it's table just based on that motion.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So moving on to item 12.
that. Take up item 12.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? So item 12 is by Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti that the city council establish a rule that requires any resident running to fill a vacant city council seat will need to obtain 50 signatures from eligible residents in order to be considered by the full council for appointment. Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti.
Yeah, thank you. I filed this kind of what I was saying earlier in my comments about if we did have a recall, or just in general, if there's a vacant city council seat. I figured that obtaining 50 signatures is what we all have to do anyway to get on the ballot. And my opinion is just that this encourages, more community involvement. This, especially if it's a ward seat, even if it's an at-large seat, this helps make the community aware that the seat is vacant for whatever reason, and just helps to bring a little bit more transparency and, for a lack of a better word, I guess, like skin in the game, rather than, I'm not trying to change us appointing someone. I just think it demonstrates an extra level of commitment and understanding and gives the opportunity for the voters to understand who is running or who's interested in running, rather than just hoping that folks will kind of tune in to city council meetings and maybe not get that opportunity to even realize that someone could throw their name in. I could see this, being something where if someone knocks on your door and they say, "Hey, I'm looking for signatures to get on the ballot," and maybe you didn't even realize that it's open. So for me, it's not necessarily about trying to create more work for anyone or for the city hall. It's just really about kind of encouraging the community at large to know this is open, and here's what we have to do to get your name on the ballot. So that's really my intentions of that order. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy Ramboletti. Anyone? So I am agreeing with this 100%. I guess my questions though is if a seat were to be vacant, what rules dictate who can be appointed into those seats? Because I know we've had city council aside, which is not I know commissions and boards are not the same, but I know in this body, names have been mentioned of people voted for that technically are not eligible, but still voted for those individuals. So I guess what is that? Is that the same for city council? If a vacant seat is open, can literally anyone be appointed? So if the Ward 3 seat was open, or any ward seat is open, the person that's appointed to that seat, does it have to be a resident of that ward? Is that by
Charter.
Okay. But then after the fact, but if they move, it doesn't matter based on the legal opinion. Okay. So I'm agreeing with this because go ahead, Councilor Bacon.
Thank you. So I just have a question. If the person has to go get the signatures, running for office, would the clerk have to provide the papers and the advice so that they're understanding, what the rules and what the, eligibility requirements are, so that the clerk would have to be issuing the papers? Or would the person just be going out like a petition and getting 50 signatures to say, I'm petitioning that I want to be appointed to the city council? Because both, they can be accomplished in two different ways, but I was just wondering if the maker was thinking about it being officially through the clerk, or that the certification by 50 voters, which is what the checkoff that they do with the petition, would suffice. I was just curious.
No, thank you for bringing up that question, because I was the rest of my thoughts, this definitely, the last order, it seems like a city clerk partly conversation as well, just to see what's happening. Go ahead, Councilor Murphy Ramboletti.
No, that's a really good question by Councilor Bacon. I think initially when I filed the order, I was thinking it would be more of a through the city clerk's office to certify that it was folks who live in that ward or whatever, but that could be something that's done without the formal process too. So I guess,
well,
I don't know.
Not if it's ward, I guess.
Right, yeah. So I could see it, I guess, when I had initially filed it, I was thinking that it would be something where, we have for a certain amount of time, people can pull papers from the city clerk's office, and then the city clerk would verify that those 50 signatures were eligible.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Councilor Puello.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say I appreciate these two orders, and I appreciate the council for the way that they dissect all these issues and they think about so many different possibilities. I don't necessarily agree with these. I think that if there's a recall or if there's a vacancy, I don't really see anything wrong with the current process, and that's just somebody comes in and they get appointed. The council has their process, we decide, and they get appointed. I don't think that I mean, what if it's in November and you're going to go out and start collecting signatures and then you're running again, you're going into an election year? I mean, you might as well campaign it at this point. And the second reason is, I mean, I don't know how much an election costs, but I know it's not cheap. And I know we don't exactly have a ton of money lying around here, so I just don't think that there's really anything wrong with the current process, and that's a seat becomes vacant. We have our, people that the community supports or whatever, and then the council appoints that person for the remainder of the term. Thank you.
Councilor McGivern.
Thank you. The practicality of doing, it's a good idea, but the practicality of it makes it concerning to, I wish the city clerk was here, because it trips into different time phases. For example, right now, anybody who wants to run this November, I believe it's this week or last week, the city clerk announced that papers would be available. Then you have X amount of time to take papers out, X amount of time to turn papers in, and X amount of time to get ready for the, if it's an election, you may have to get ready for a primary election itself. So if it's taking out papers just for us to vote on them, we're delaying the voters of a position, whether it's at large or for a ward, from having a voice or a representation, especially if it's for a ward, because it sounds like it could be 30, 60 days before we could take our vote. If you want to have a special election for a 2-year term, it just becomes a nightmare, I think, for the city clerk. Not just expensive, but you got to time it with all those deadlines, being allowed. And even at a minimum, you're talking a special election, if I remember correctly, could take 3 to 4 months to set up. So I think we need the city clerk to inform us on some of these deadlines and what the Mass General laws say and what the charter says in terms of giving people time to take out papers, and if you want to have a special election, how much time before you can actually have the special election.
Thank you, Councilor McGivern. I just wanted to clarify, we're just talking about item 12, which is just getting the 50 signatures. Item 13 does talk about a special election, but that can be on its own thing, separate from the 50 signatures we're discussing now. Right now, I think based on if we were just...
I understand, Chair. It just, there's still like deadlines on signatures.
Cool. Okay, cool. Councilor Murphy-Ramballetti.
No, I was just gonna reiterate that my goal is not to actually change on whether or not we would still, as a city council, be appointing someone. I just think adding a few extra weeks and maybe I would love to hear from the city clerk at perhaps the next meeting or before then, just what that timeline would look like. I think it's worth seeing if that's possible, and we could create language that says, if it's within a certain time frame, then and it's too close, then sure, that's fine. But if there is a vacancy, I respectfully disagree that the way that it's done right now there's no problems with it. I think the way that it's done right now encourages the same few folks to throw their name in the ring for an appointment by the city council, and it unfortunately can get a little political. And I just think making it more democratic is worth exploring. So just, I do think that it's worth continuing to have the conversation, but I do agree. I'd love to hear what the city clerk has to say about if this is like a reasonable option for 50 signatures. We do right now get a very long time frame to get 50 signatures in order to be on the city council ballot. So that's my point there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Murphy-Ramballetti. I know it's been said a couple times, things being political. I just also want to state we are 13 elected politicians, local politicians, just city councilors, but politicians nonetheless. So things are going to get political, and that is literally what we're here for every day. Councilor McGivern.
It's true, but this is a charter change. It is a change to the form of government that we have, because we are elected officials, and the voters and the covenant of the charter, ask us to perform this duty. It's not a duty that any one of us would ever like to do, as far as I'm concerned, because we're second guessing what voters would do on a legitimate election day. But again, it's one of those time-driven constraints that we, again, if it's a ward vacancy, the voters of that ward deserve a voice as quickly as possible. And, to do this, it would be adding time to allowing us. My question through the committee, if you would, to the law department, though, is as an elected official, when it comes to the ballot process, I'm allowed to vote for anyone, regardless of if we interview them, if they apply. And when my name calls up and that holds for each of us, we can choose the person that we think would best fit the vacancy, particular vacancy that's in front of us. So I think it opens up, it sounds great. I like the idea when I first heard it, but it does open up a can of worms.
Anyone else? Okay. So lots of good things said. I think where we're at right now with this one in particular, would love to get one. So we're definitely inviting Brenna to the next meeting to discuss this further. But also, I think we can get legal to draft some sort of language to include this, and then we can discuss it at the next meeting as well. So those are my one motion. So to ask legal to draft language around this that we can discuss next time, and invite City Clerk Brenna McGee in.
That was a motion?
Yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item
13.
Yep.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Item 13, by MALDONADO-VELEZ, ordered that when a vacancy opened up in City Council with more than 6 months left of the term, that a special election is required. I want to give this one right now a leave to withdraw, and that's just where I'm at with that one.
Okay.
All right, motion is leave to withdraw.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Cool. And then the rest should be pretty straightforward, hopefully. Motion to take up item 14 and 15 together as a package.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So item 14 is to do a little cleanup. Order that we add a rule 9B8, a committee to read the Youth Services Committee shall have jurisdiction over matters relating to youth and are the representative body for the joint committee of the City Council and School Committee. Item 15, that we revert the committee name, Council Rule 9B7, to read the joint committee of the City Council and School Committee instead of the Youth Services Committee. So the reason behind this, a couple months ago, we changed the name of the joint school committee to the Youth Services Committee, but it wasn't what we actually wanted. So after it happened, the name change happened, the school committee reached out. One, we didn't really include them in the conversation, so they were definitely feeling a little, I don't want to say hurt, but they were definitely feeling some type of way around that. But the intention behind it is that we still have the joint committee of the City Council School Committee. Unfortunately, there are some items that can't be discuss in that because they can only discuss school related issues. But as mentioned before, not all youth are part of the whole public school system. And youth can, go up to age 21, depending on, where you get the definition of youth. So just really having a committee that focuses on youth services overall in the city. I know there's talks about trying to get a sports complex, all those sort of things that can't be discussed at the joint school committee, but a youth services committee should discuss that. Does that make sense? Where I'm going with it, or what I just said. Mr. McGee is giving me a look. Councilor Bacon.
Just a question. So could something like that be taken up fairly by public service, regardless of the age of the group that would be served by whatever activity or program is needed?
It can, technically.
They don't.
Any order can be taken up by any committee.
That
right?
heavy.
So,
but just not a hard question.
ahead, Councilor McGee.
So we have the Youth Services Committee where they're on the school side and they were here too, on our side. Just that after a while, it wasn't either promoted correctly or what have you, and then they stopped coming. So I guess I'm trying to figure out what you're trying to do.
So right now, we have the 7 committees, one of them being the joint, the previous to the name change or whatever, being the joint committee of the City Council and School Committee. My understanding is that that committee can only discuss school-related topics, like no other, like unless so like one of the conversations we're having, like you mentioned, like the and Councilor Bacon just asked the question, it can go to other committees, like any order can go to any committee, but it'd be good for the Youth Services Committee. I mean, and the other one was, for example, we were supposed to have a youth representative. That's one of our city council rules. So that's something that this committee will be in charge of. Unfortunately, like this committee, as it stands as being the joint school committee, can't take up that youth representative because that's not a school-related issue. So now if we had a Youth Services Committee that can take up the youth sort of issues, and they also are the ones that represent. So you're not forming another committee. They just also happen to be the ones that are the representatives in the joint school committee council.
That's kind of, because you have youth representatives for the school, you have youth representatives for the council. Those have been approved. We've had them in the past. And if the youth are at the school side are part of the joint committee but can only talk about school stuff but want to talk about something else, then really they could come into like public service or public safety or whatever. See, that's why I'm trying to figure out exactly how we're trying to.
Well, there's those representatives, and then there's also the city council under. So that's the different youth, yeah. Right. So.
I'm so confused.
Councilor Puello has his hands up. Go ahead, Councilor Puello.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to see if maybe we could get legal to weigh in and make sure that understanding is correct, because I mean, like, for example, if that's the case, I mean, maybe the rules could be changed for that specific committee and that would be simpler, because for me, I've got an order that's been sitting in there for almost 2 years. And I think that committee only meets, it meets like once, twice a year. So I mean, more meetings would be great. I think that committee could definitely use some more workload. So if legal could weigh in on if that's a correct understanding, and if it is, can't the rules just be changed for that? Thank you.
Well, I think when you have the joint school committee in the city, and Mike Bissonnette can correct me, just like the school committee can't discuss non-school committee issues. And I think that's part of the problem.
And if I remember correctly, there was also it was mentioned that like someone who's on the Youth Services Committee may not be a Holyoke Public School student also.
Yeah, exactly.
That was something that was also mentioned at the meeting. So I get where they're coming from. I guess I'm confused, as I usually am in this room.
You're good. Attorney Bissonnette, you came off mute. Maybe you have some things to weigh in.
Well, if I understand it correctly, you want the portion of the city council's representation to this joint committee to be your youth services committee. So it can take up issues that are not related to the schools, but are related to youths in the city. Recreation issue regard to playing fields. That would not necessarily be related to the schools, but certainly could be a topic that youth throughout Holyoke could be interested in and want to be heard. So if I understand correctly, you want to denominate that particular group to be known as the Youth Services Committee, and they will represent the City Council on the Joint Committee.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's exactly it. Okay. Does that make sense? That's still good.
Yeah, no, I'm getting it.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm wondering, I mean, I know we had, I guess when I did the name change, when we did the name change a couple months ago, the intention, it needed more than just the name change. It almost needed to form a completely new committee. I thought just changing the name to youth services, saying it's no longer just a school committee, was going to take care of it, but clearly it didn't.
But the Youth Services Committee is like a part.
No, the other way.
Okay. The joint committee of the City Council and School Committee is a part of the Youth Services Committee.
Or you can just yes and no, or you can just say the Youth Services Committee represents the council on the joint school committee.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Attorney Bissonnette, would you?
I don't know. Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Do we want?
I just don't know what exactly we're.
I feel like Mr. Bissonnette and I get it, and we're we're not explaining it a certain way. I'm wondering could we put this into language so that we can look at it next time? Maybe it's you, when you write it down, make it a little bit clearer as to like what exactly we're trying to achieve here.
It's the Super Bowl, really. The American Football Conference will be the representatives from the school committee. The National Football Conference will be the representatives from the City Council. And that team from the City Council will be known as the Youth Services Committee. And the team from the AFC will be known just as the school committee.
Yeah.
It's football season. I figured I'd try for that.
You spoke a whole nother language because I do not watch football, so I don't know anything what you just said. But Tessa looked like she may.
I can do the relegation leagues in soccer too.
I don't know.
I follow it. Yeah. All right. Do you want to? Okay.
I want to. I don't know. Like, I thought it was gonna be simple enough because I was gonna ask to like just have the language ready for the next council meeting if it was possible. Just because I know again there's some items that need to take in place. I know. I mean, Councilor Wilpoy just mentioned some orders. I know I have some orders in the joint committee as well. If we're okay with either one, requesting language from legal and we can vote at the next city council, or if we as a committee want to request it from legal so that we can discuss it at the next charter and rules. It's up to you.
I think you can have it ready for next meeting.
Okay. Attorney Bissonnette, will we be able to have that language ready for Tuesday?
Next council?
Yes.
Next city council meeting.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Jeffrey.
$15 is a very straightforward thing, and just because I'd be the one kind of fixing it back on the website and the way it's organized, I might suggest just getting 15 through, since that's pretty simple, and then 14 is the one you have to flesh out a little more.
Yeah, that's
okay. That makes sense.
So, motion to approve item 15.
Mm-hmm. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And then, I mean, we can still flesh it out. I guess it's technically creating a new committee. If we want to discuss it in the next charter and rules.
Well, either way, you're gonna change the name back, right?
Yeah. So that was
Okay.
15.
All right. Sorry.
Take 14, table it till we get the legal
language.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Second.
you have a little bit longer, Attorney Bissonnette. So that'd be for item 14. Motion would be to get language from the attorney, and we can discuss at the next charter and rules committee meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And the last one.
16.
Second. Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. 16. So it's just trying to clear up and make the jacket clearer. These are just samples that I sent from other cities. So I just wanted us to make a motion to archive it, just so we can keep it, but in our files, just not in the actual jacket because it's been taken care of. So motion to archive.
Motion is to archive them.
Second.
How about we say Motion has been complied with and to put into our archives.
So a motion that has been complied with and put into our archives.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. So I think that's it. Before we do motion to adjourn, I think in a month or 2 months, just Attorney Bissonnette, I don't think we're meeting for another 2 months, just a heads up, but that's it.
Cool. Thank you.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Right.